Yeah. So Gothenburg tonight. What's the expectations for the show?
I don't know. It should be fun. I don't know. It's hard to say, really. We've only just got into Scandinavia on this trip. The main bulk of it was Germany. So yeah, Oslo was first, and that was cool. I mean, we have to bear in mind it's not our audience, so we're not going out there expecting a killer reception, because it just isn't happening, to be honest. But you know, it's fun to do these gigs anyway. It's kind of a challenge. If you win over a few people, then it's a victory.
Yeah. Yeah, and last time you played in Gothenburg was Metal Town. Do you remember that gig?
Yeah, terrible. Yeah.
Terrible?
I thought it was awful.
Why?
Just a lot of things. You know, when you start playing and everything goes wrong immediately, as far as gear and stuff like that, it was one of those. So yeah, that's not a very memorable one for me. Or rather it is, but for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. And you've been out for like 4 weeks?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
How is it to tour with Amon Amarth, except from the crowd?
Oh, well, you know, the band are lovely people, their crew are killer. I mean, the first few days are always tricky, when you're trying to settle in and everyone's trying to not step on the headliner's toes. But yeah, they've just been very civilised, I guess, and obviously the band's massive. I mean, we've seen that, especially in Germany. You know, sometimes the audiences would be, you know, 3,000 people or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely been. I knew they were big, but it's been an eye-opener actually experiencing it directly. You know.
How has it been for you when you go out on stage? How does the crowd react? Is it like, who are they? Or
yeah, mostly. There's usually a handful of people who seem to know who we are. Yeah, and that's about it really.
Yeah.
I hadn't realised quite how extreme it was. You know, it's a very different kind of crowd from the crowd we would attract.
Yeah.
Which I suppose, you know, that was probably Jeff's rationale for us doing this tour, because we could reach some different people. You know, it's a very partisan audience, the Amon Amarth crowd. It's one of those bands. They attract a very loyal fan base that isn't necessarily interested in anybody else. You know.
Yeah. And your band have been on a break for 12 years?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think how long it was.
I think it was.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because we broke up in '95.
Yeah.
Then we got
back together.
The reunion stuff. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And what were you all doing while you didn't play together?
Lots of stuff. I mean, God. I mean, I did a whole string of different jobs. Just to finance my music habit, really. You know, so I had a band, but it wasn't really doing a tremendous amount. Certainly not enough to support me. So yeah, I was just working, I guess.
Yeah.
And I guess the same for Jeff. You know, obviously Ken went through some stuff which I think most people know about. So you know, that's been very time-consuming for him, just getting getting back on track as far as his health and fitness and everything.
Yeah.
So I mean, that period went by very quickly, but it was quite useful in a way, because I hadn't really experienced the outside world.
No.
I hadn't spent any time around people who weren't music people. So all of a sudden, I don't know. I guess I just learned a thing or two about how to mix with the real world and, you know, what I call civilians, you know, normal people. Don't obsess about music.
You hadn't been in the studio for almost 17 years until this last record. How was it when y'all got back together in the studio? Or in the rehearsal room while writing, or wherever you write the music?
It was just a load of fun, especially the writing process, because we had all the time in the world, because we hadn't told anybody what we were doing, and there was no label involvement. So if we wanted to, we could have taken 3 years to write an album. Obviously that was never going to happen, but we had total flexibility. So yeah, it was just Dan, Jeff and myself getting into the rehearsal room and blasting out riffs. Usually what would happen would be I'd bring in a set of riffs, and that would just be the start of a track, because it would go through so many different permutations and arrangements because of their ideas. So sometimes we'd end up with something very different from the initial piece that I brought in. So it was quite exciting. There was every day there was something happening, something useful. So that was quite a creative period. And then the studio time was, you know, a little bit more like hard graft in some ways, because you have to kind of find a way to work with the producer and engineer. You know, they have their own ideas of how things should be. So, you know, a bit of compromise, I suppose, is taking place, whether you like it or not.
And you worked with Colin as a producer. How was it to work with him?
Well, great. I mean, socially it was very good. It just carried on the way it was, you know, because he did every record, bar the first one. So yeah, we missed the guy, and you know, there's the same kind of humour and camaraderie in that sense. But yeah, things have changed certainly. The way he likes to work now is very different. So I think, yeah, at times it was probably difficult for him or difficult for us, you know, because we had our own strong ideas about how things needed to be. But he worked really hard on the record, and so did Carl, the engineer. And they weren't able to mix it for various reasons. But it's almost perfect in a way that it actually turned out, because Andy Sneap stepped in. And as much as I think Colin's great, I don't know if his mixes would have been as powerful as Andy's. I mean, they're really, really strong. I think they really suit the music, and so we had the best of both worlds. You know, we had those guys throughout the whole tracking process, and then when they ran out of steam, Andy stepped in, and I think, you know, we're quite content with the result. Like, you know, I wouldn't say 100% happy, because you never are, but yeah.
I know that Colin have worked with every band from your band until like bands like metalcore band and stuff. What do you think he brought to the record?
I think Colin, one of his strong points is just extreme attention to detail, sonic detail. That's the kind of area of expertise he has, I think. Because, for example, it will be a very small thing, like if you're playing a part which involves a lot of chugging on the low E string, or, you know, it's really tuned to B. He's very focused on what he wants it to sound like and the way it resonates, and he'll ask you to move your palm just a millimetre this way or that way. The point is, it actually does sound better. You know, it's the kind of thing that most of us wouldn't think about, but he's focused on that. Whereas more the performance angle, that's probably of less interest to him. He's very much a sonic kind of guy.
And what did Andy brought to the record?
Again, his expertise, I think, which is, he's a musician himself, so he knows how things should balance out. You don't need to explain anything, like, oh, the level of the hi-hat or whatever. And he's a guitar player, so that's good news for me. It means the guitars are nice and cranked. But he got the drums sounding nice and natural too, and we were just very happy. It was very punchy. Colin and Carl had done some rough mixes earlier on, but they weren't really what we were looking for. And you know, I think they themselves were losing interest in completing the project anyway. So yeah, Andy just tightened everything up massively. As soon as he started work, you could see there was going to be a finished album that we were happy with very, very quickly. So that was nice, after waiting around for a few months, you know.
Yeah, and what was the biggest difference from this process between the earlier processes and...
Oh, you mean in recording terms?
Yeah, or writing?
With writing it's incredibly similar.
Yeah.
I mean, it's how it always was, you know, go into the rehearsal place with a bunch of riffs and get to work, and you know, bounce the ideas between the three of you. And yeah, we are more or less drawing from the same pool of influences that we always drew from. So that's another reason why the album sounds the way it does. We haven't made any attempt at keeping up with what's current in metal, because we just don't listen to anything current. So yeah, that side of it was really easy, and we certainly didn't waste any energy thinking about what people in the outside world would think, because that would have just driven us crazy, you know, people's expectations or whatever they might be. But in the studio, yeah, that's way different. So much has changed. I mean, all the old albums were done on tape, 2-inch tape, and that whole way of working gives you extreme limitations in a sense, and the digital thing actually opens it up massively. And I'm not even sure that's a good thing, because it means you spend more time rather than less, I think, and you're not as ruthless in your decision making. But on the bright side, we didn't actually we didn't use a click track for recording the drums.
No.
So therefore we couldn't do the whole thing on the grid system, where you can just move stuff around.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know plenty of bands do that, and that was absolutely essential to us. We didn't want that kind of record that was just totally level.
No.
Nothing jumps out at you. So I think that was a little bit of a challenge for Colin and Carl, because they have worked with groups who are quite happy to record one chorus for a song, and then just move that over a couple more times. So everything on this record had to be played from start to finish, which, I mean, sounds like common sense to me, but evidently it's not, not always the case.
From the first tune to the last.
The
song,
So yeah, just that whole recording process has definitely changed. We did our best to keep it as true to the way we used to record as possible. So yeah.
And before, legally downloading and online streaming wasn't too big. Have you seen it have affected this album in any ways, or?
I personally don't think so, because obviously the record was leaked. I don't know how long before the release date, a month or a few weeks anyway. And the label weren't happy, but we didn't really mind, because I mean, if somebody is the kind of person that buys product, as whatever you want to call it, CDs or vinyl, they will do that anyway. And if they're not that kind of person, I mean, there are some people who just don't want to buy stuff at all, then they're kind of in that camp anyway. So I don't think it really affected us. It might have even helped in a way, because people, talked about the record, and generally the feeling out there was that it was strong. It wasn't, it wasn't a turkey like people would have expected. So I think it was probably good publicity in its own way.
Can you see Carcass making another album, or?
Yes, I could. We'd definitely like to. Let's just see when we get through all of this touring. We've got so much next year too. If the vibe of the band is as good as it is now, I would definitely expect us to start work on something. But we wouldn't want to rush it, because it would need to be good. So we'd have to spend some time.
So you haven't started working on any riffs?
No, I mean there's tons of ideas. The stuff, because there was so much kicking around for the last album. We had to draw
old material.
Kind of. I mean that record, Surgical Steel. It's very hard to analyse. There's a large number of riffs that are from, the past, like stuff I had in the 90s through to the years between when the band didn't exist. And then once we got actually busy writing, I suddenly started coming up with more and more. So probably the end result, it was at least 50-50 old and new, or maybe slightly more new, I don't know. But needless to say, there's still ideas from the past that haven't been explored. So there's that stuff, and I come up with things now and then. So I don't think there's going to be any shortage of tunes.
You said that you were working on stuff while the band didn't exist. Were the thoughts of the band might do a reunion?
Oh no, not at all. I mean, it wasn't a case of working on stuff. It was more kind of, I'd find myself playing certain riffs that felt like Carcass riffs. Because obviously the music I was playing at that time was completely different. Firebird, for example, that's more of a traditional hard rock band with a kind of bluesy vibe. But as time went on, especially around the last Firebird record, I was playing riffs at home that were just too heavy for that group, and it was obviously Carcass material. So that was a big factor in us deciding to make the record. The fact that it was happening all the time, and it was quite spontaneous, it felt like that was the natural direction to go in, really.
How was the moment when you all decided to go back together again?
Well, that initial reunion period involving Mike and Daniel from Arch Enemy.
Yeah.
It's hazy now, really, but I think there'd been attempts to get us to reform in previous years, and I hadn't really been interested.
No.
I was probably the main problem.
Yeah.
And then gradually I was persuaded. At first I just thought, well, there can't really be that much interest. I don't really want us to exhaust ourselves and kind of put ourselves out there and look foolish when there isn't actually much demand for us. But later it was explained to me that no, that actually those records were, you know, reasonably popular, and well, certainly more so now than they were. So yeah, I spoke to Mike about it, and yeah, he was really good because he invited me over to his house just to jam, really, just play guitars. So that was a zero pressure situation. It was just a case of like, let's see how this feels. So that was the first step, and it felt really good. So then it was a case of booking band rehearsals and just getting busy.
But you haven't regretted on tour, while touring with Carcass after?
Regretted it?
No? The reform of the band?
Oh no, God, no. Absolutely not. It's brilliant. You know.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I mean, you know, a tour like this can be exhausting because, well, we've had so many problems with our bus. It's unbelievable. Like breakdowns, you know, burst tires. Yeah, so there's been a few sleepless nights and stuff like that. But yeah, this is what we like to do. It's fun.
Yeah. That was everything for the interview.
Cool.
So
thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.